So we are still talking about your pay periods, right? Like that biweekly, semi-monthly, all of that stuff. We're going to talk about your hourly rates. We're also going to look at overtime pay. Because I know people know like time and a half, right? You say it all the time, but do you know what that really means? I think some do, but some, thank you. Some people know, and some are like, oh, I didn't know that's how you found that. Like they're just oblivious on how that works. So we're going to talk about that. Um, Guys, as I put up definitions for things, I want to make sure like you guys know these are your notes. So if I write a huge thing and you can sum it up in 3 words, that's fine. It's your notes, whatever helps you remember, okay? Just so you know. So we did talk about this yesterday. Weekly, how many times is that? How many weeks are in a year? Weekly means you get paid once a week. You'd get 52 paychecks per year, right? So if you get paid weekly, you are paid every single week. How many of you are paid weekly? Oh, nice. Majority. You was? All right, biweekly, what does that mean? Every other week. Paid once every 2 weeks or every other week, and that's 26 per year. Again, kind of tying yesterday's notes with today, right? We talked about that yesterday. Semi-monthly, that's how I get paid. What's that mean? It's twice a month. Twice a month. Yeah, it's slightly more than 2 weeks. It's not that bad. You get used to it. And I actually got lucky. Like my husband's a teacher as well, and he gets paid semi-monthly, but I get paid the 10th and the 25th. He just so happens he gets paid the 15th and the last day of the month. So like we technically get a paycheck about every week then. So it actually worked out nice. And then monthly, what would that mean? Every month, which is how many times a year? That would be 12. It's less common. You don't see it very often. But paid once a month, 12 paychecks per year. Yeah. Like people who are on disability, they get a paycheck once a month. So yeah, you got to really have some budgeting skills. And you know what? We will do a whole chapter on budgeting to help you guys out. So if you fall into that, I'll teach you how to budget. All right. So, okay. So again, this was from yesterday, right? There shouldn't have been anything earth-shattering new. Oh, you need me again. Sorry. Sorry. All right. Direct deposit. What does it mean if your check is direct deposited? Hey, guys. Sorry. Go again. What's direct deposit mean? Right. Somebody actually named it something that makes sense, right? It's directly deposited into your bank account, right? Paycheck amounts are automatically deposited electronically into a bank account on payday. No longer do you have to waste time going to your employer, picking up your check, driving to the bank, and cashing it. Now, do any of you still get a paper check? Wow, seriously? Okay, but your money is automatically in your account. Okay, so you are direct deposit. Yeah.
I'll get direct deposit and then I'll also get another check. And it's like $24.
That's weird. You ever ask them why?
I always ask for it.
It's a pain in the butt, right? Now, do you guys know you can deposit your checks by taking pictures of them, right? I do that with Huntington. Yeah, I know other banks have that. Yeah, there's a thing. If you online bank and have your accounts, through their online banking, I do it all the time. Yep. All you have to do is you sign your check like you normally would, and you go in there and you type in what the check amount is on your, like, I do it on my phone all the time. Take a picture of the front, you take a picture of the back. Within a day or so, it's in my account. It's so nice. I never go to the bank anymore. Really? Huh. I'd have to look into that. I don't know. I'd never heard that you had to be 21. Have you done it before? Okay, so you do it at Huntington, but okay. I'll have to look into that though, because I don't. Yeah, I'll have to look into that whole 21 thing. I've not heard that. All right. Here we go. I think this is the last of the vocab for today. So what does it mean, your hourly rate? How much you make an hour. All right, a set amount a person is paid for each hour they work. What is minimum wage right now? $8.55. I remember, I'm gonna make myself sound old. I remember when minimum wage like went up to like $6.15. That was like the greatest thing ever. It went up to $6.15. All right, overtime. Again, write what you need to write. You don't necessarily have to write it all. I just like to be extra thorough. So overtime, a set amount of money a person is paid for each hour they work beyond their regular hours. Okay, so this is usually more than 40 hours per week. We talked about that yesterday. Overtime rate is usually time and a half, but sometimes overtime or holiday can be double time. You can, yeah. Yeah, it just depends on where you work. No, yeah, so it just depends where you work, how nice they are to you. Does anybody ever get a chance to make double time at your jobs? Wow, a couple of you. That's good. McDonald's lets you earn double time? For overtime? He has no idea. It is double time for them. That's really good. That's it. See, it all depends on where you work. All right. What does gross pay mean? Before taxes. Good. And some of your regular pay and your overtime pay, and this is without taxes, but it's all of it together, how much money you actually made. Now, your gross pay versus your net pay. Are they usually close? Yeah. It's disgusting. If you ever look at how much you gross and then how much you actually get, like makes you sad and cry. Yeah, it's like, great. Well, yeah, so you guys do. Just wait till next year. You won't. Yeah, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to compute all of those different taxes, and we'll look at the tax brackets and like depending on how much you make and how what percent they take, and we'll do all of that in here. So you guys will see where all your money's going and how they figure that out. Yes. I will teach you how to do your taxes. Still? You Oh, so you may want to contact them. You should have that back by now. Yeah, you might want to contact them on that. All right. So here we go, guys. Number one, Christina is paid bi-weekly. Her annual salary is $37,000. What is her bi-weekly salary rounded to the nearest cent? So hopefully you grabbed calculators or got your calculator out when you came in. If not, we'll grab one. All right, so first thing, we want bi-weekly. How many times a year is bi-weekly? That is 26. You have to know those keywords, guys. They gave you the annual salary. So what do I have to do with the annual salary to take it back to biweekly? Just divide it. So 37,000 divided by 26. Good. All right, guys, I do want you all to try this on your own with the calculators because there's rounding issues that go on, and I know students mess that up all the time. So let's make sure we're okay on how to round on our own. So $1,423. It should be 8 cents. It was 0.076. So since I want to round to the nearest cent, which is always the second decimal, then I have to look at the number after it. If this number is 5 or higher, it's going to round that one up. So the 7 rounded to an 8 to make it 8 cents. Double check your answers. Do you have a dollar sign in the front? Okay, I will count you off if you do not. Some of you on your homework forgot dollar signs. Hey guys, if you can do me a favor, I feel like I keep talking over people. Can we just like chill for a little bit while we go through these notes? Okay, I'd appreciate it. All right, number 2. Manny is paid semi-monthly. What is that? Twice a month, which is how many pays? It's 24. Again, if you don't know that, you're going to miss the problem no matter what you do. His semi-monthly salary is $12.39. What is his annual salary? Read carefully, because this is not the same as the problem we just did above it. What do you want to do? Can you tell me what you did? 24. Yep, what'd you get? Very good. Did you put a dollar sign in front of it? Yeah, so guys, the biggest thing with this class, and I think some of you noticed it on homework where it said to like round to the nearest dollar, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot, right? And I think I did that yesterday in class, right? I forgot to round to the nearest dollar. So make sure you're careful what it's asking. This is the exact opposite as the first problem. Don't automatically assume I'm always going to divide, always going to divide, always going to divide, because you don't. Okay, and be careful what it's asking. Questions on the first 2? Great. All right, so let's talk about overtime then. Time and a half is most common. Time and a half means how do you find how much you're making for time and a half? I heard divide, multiply it by 1.5. Yeah. Do you guys remember how I showed you the shortcut with the taxes? I multiplied by 1 point, whatever that percentage was, right? Some of you were like in amazement because you've never seen that before. Same thing here. That's why it's 1.5. It's going to take what you started with, and it's going to add on the extra half. So it's time and a half. Right? So, for example, if your hourly rate is $12.45 and your overtime is time and a half, what is your overtime rate? Okay, so to figure that out, $12.45 is how much you would normally make per hour. All you have to do is multiply by 1.5, since I'm making time and a half. Yeah, and that's how much you find out how much you're making for overtime. 18.68. It was 675, but that's going to make that round up to 68. Okay, so to figure out how much you make for overtime, you just multiply it by 1.5, time and a half. So what's double time then? You're going to multiply it by 2. Not 2.5. It's not double time and a half. Yeah. So double time, if I'm going to double something, you just multiply it by 2. So if your hourly rate is $12.45, and I make double time, you just have to multiply it by 2, which is what? 24.9? What's that mean? That's 90 cents, guys. Yeah, your calculator is going to give you 0.9. It's going to stop. But you got to think, we're talking money here, so that's $24.90. Don't round to the nearest dollar, nearest cent. Your employer's not going to be that nice and round it up for you either. Questions on how to just find how much you make for time and a half and double time? That should be pretty straightforward. So let's kind of put all this together a little bit. Maureen works at a local Burger King restaurant. Her regular hourly wage is $9.70. If she regularly works 40 hours per week, what is her regular weekly pay? So do I have to worry about any type of overtime for her? No. Okay, so if she normally makes $9.70 an hour and she works 40 hours, how do I figure out how much she made? Just multiply, yeah. You're always going to take how many hours you're working, and you're always going to multiply that by the wage, right? I know what's coming, so if you think I'm being a bit overly drawn out on this, just bear with me. I know what's coming in a few examples. But you always take the hours, right, and then you multiply that by the wage. That's how we're always kind of setting these up. So 40 times 970, 388. take their hours, multiply by the wage. It's going to give you how much money. Well, if Maureen from example 3 works overtime, she receives an hourly rate of 1.5 times her regular hour rate. So she makes time and a half. What is Maureen's hourly overtime rate? So how do I figure out how much she makes per hour? Good. The 970 times 1.5. So 970 times 1.5 is 1455. So then any time she works any hours over her 40 hours, she would make 1455 for every one of those hours. All right. If I ever go too fast for you guys, just make sure you say something, okay? Questions so far? Number 5. Janice earns $10 per hour. If her regular hours are 40 hours per week and she receives time and a half overtime, find her total pay for a week in which she works 45 hours. All right, so let's kind of set this up real basic first just so we can kind of understand what we're doing, okay, before we even talk numbers. So she gets paid so much for the first 40 hours, right, and then she makes so much for anything over that. So on the last one, we had set that up as hours times pay, right? So let's do that again. For the first 40 hours, how much does she make? $10. That was her pay. Now, what are we going to do with overtime? This is how much she makes for the first 40. Are we going to add it, subtract it, multiply it, divide it? Well, hold on. I'm trying to go real slow and basic through this, okay? We're going to add on anything she makes for overtime, though, right? That amount gets added on. So it's going to be her overtime hours, right? Multiply that by her overtime pay. Does that make sense? Right? Her regular hours times how much she makes. Then we're going to add to that her overtime hours times how much she makes for overtime. Okay, so how many overtime hours did she have? 5. Do we know her overtime pay? Can I find it? Yeah, let's find it quick. What is her overtime pay? Overtime, like her pay rate. Like she normally makes $10 an hour. So 10 times, what do I multiply by? 1.5. Which is 15. So she normally makes $15 an hour for overtime. Stop me if I just lost you on that one, okay? We need to know how much she makes in overtime. So if you're somebody who like really likes to organize your work because you're like, I'm not sure what's going on, some of the things you may want to write down ahead of time is her overtime pay. You may want to organize her regular pay. Her regular pay is $10. Overtime is 15. That way you can kind of just see those numbers because you know you're going to need them. Then you can kind of plug them into the formula, so to speak. So how much does she make altogether? So all we have to do, if you set this up, can I just type the whole thing in? Yeah, I can just type it all in. So 40 times 10 plus 5 times 15 is 475. 5 times, she had 5 overtime hours, and she made $15 an hour for overtime. Right, for overtime, she normally makes $10 times time and a half. Okay. Now, guys, I know what is coming soon as far as what I'm going to ask you to do. You may want to make sure you've written down what I just put a big blue box around. I think it will help you on what's coming up in the future here. So to find that total pay, it's her regular hours. I may even want to jot that down on there. Regular hours times regular pay plus overtime hours times overtime pay. And that gives you your total pay. Does that make sense, though? You take how much you make normally, and you add to that how much you made for overtime. It's going to give you how much you made altogether. All right. So that being said, let me give you guys a few minutes to do number 6 on your own. Okay? Try number 6. All right, guys. Take a look at 6. You guys look pretty good going through these. Let's just make sure everyone's okay. So Josh earned $16 per hour. So I'm just going to kind of organize a little bit. His regular pay is 16. Overtime pay. Let's see. His regular hours are 40 hours per week. He receives time and a half. So I'm going to have to do 16 times 1.5. So how much does he make? That'd be 24. All right, find his total pay for a week. You all right? Okay. In which he works 47 hours. So if you kind of look back at how we set these up to make sure everyone's okay. Some of you tried to move on to number 7, and then you're like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. You're not the only one. You need to know this, okay? That's why I wrote this down, because I know that 7 and 8 are coming. All right, so we're going to take our regular and overtime. We're going to plug it in here, right? Regular hours, which is 40, times the regular pay, which is 16, plus overtime hours. How many hours do we have of overtime? 7. And we already found the overtime pay was 24. And that should equal the total pay, which we found was 808. Okay? Doing all right? Pretty good. Other than losing some dollar signs for some of you, you look pretty good. All right. So the last two, which you guys were like, I don't know how to do these. Let me explain. All right. So if you kind of think back to what we were just looking at, that I had the blue box around. Keep that in your mind. Because for these, Samantha worked 40 regular hours last week plus 7 overtime hours at time and a half. Her gross pay was $611.05. What was her hourly rate? So what's the variable that I don't know? Her hourly rate. So if we set it up kind of like before, I always kind of separate regular rates, which in this case I can use, what variable do you normally use? X? I have no idea what that is. And then overtime rate, what would you put for overtime rate? 1.5 times X, right? It's time and a half. So it helps me when I organize stuff like this. That way when I get to the ones that are more algebraic, like this one, that I can kind of still function my way through it. I can still set it up. So if you look back at the one we did, we took regular hours times regular pay. What are my regular hours? 40. Times regular pay, X, plus, oops, wrong way. It's overtime hours times overtime pay. Overtime hours, 7. Overtime pay, 1.5x. And that should equal my total pay. Do I know the total pay? $611.05. That is your initial setup. Now, if you look back at that previous slide, though, where I put the blue box around it, hopefully that should make sense. I'm just kind of filling in the same way I did before. I just have an unknown where I didn't have an unknown last time. So what would be the first thing I should do? Like terms, even before like terms, I should probably multiply that 7 and the 1.5. Okay? So here I get 40 times x, which is just 40x. 7 times 1.5. And you thought algebra was behind you, right? It's a basic equation. Hopefully we're okay. So now can I collect my like terms? Yep. 40x plus 10.5x is 50.5x. Good. Yep. And then I'm just going to divide that by the 50.5. So 611.05. Not that I don't trust you, but I'm just going to check to be sure. All right, and I got 1210. Does it make sense? Could you check your answer to make sure it actually worked? Yeah. If that's your hourly rate, you could go back and now redo the problem just like the previous ones and make sure you get the same answer at the end. You absolutely could. All right, but I'm still setting up that same process. Regular pay times the regular hours, right? The overtime hours times the overtime rate equals my total. So go ahead and try number 8 on your own test. All right, so again, I always set up my regular rate and my overtime rates. All right, so it tells us she worked 40 hours, 6 overtime, time and a half. Her gross pay is $612.50. What was her hourly rate? So when I set this up, her regular rate, I don't know. We're going to say is X. So then to find time and a half rate is 1.5X. Now, had I told you she made double time, how would you set up the bottom? 2X. Okay, so just read carefully. Don't assume it's always 1.5X. Depends on the problem. All right, so then we're going to set it up by her hours. So 40 regular times X, overtime hours, times her rate, which is 1.5X. And that should equal her total pay, $612.50. Okay, questions on the setup. They look pretty good walking around, but I sometimes miss people. All right, so then this becomes 40X. 6 times 1.5X would be 9X. And then we have like terms. So 40X plus 9X is 49X equals $612.50. Yep, and then we'll divide to get X by itself. Ooh, I have an extra 1 in there, don't I? All right, so what do we get? X equals $12.50. And this is what a lot of you wrote down. I'm taking a point off. Why? We're talking money. You must have 2 digits there. The only time you do not have to have 2 digits is if it was even. If it was like $12, I don't need 0.00, okay? But if there's change there, you better put the 0 on the end, okay? $12.50. Questions on anything? I wish.